All right, hello everyone. We are live on YouTube right now. So let's get the show on the road. Give me a quick second just to transition my screens. Just so you all know, the session is being recorded and is also being streamed live to YouTube as well. There we go. All right, there we go. So this is the Ideation and Creativity Workshop. If this is your first time attending one of my webinars, this is the flow for tonight. We go through some quick intros. We jump right into the presentation. There's going to be time for Q&A throughout, but there will be time at the end for more questions as well. And then we will wrap up at 7:30 sharp. So it's going to be about an hour and a half for the entire session. Just some quick housekeeping. My recommendation is if you have insights, if you have found that certain things work best for you, do share. I never like to set myself up as the only expert in the room. I think there are different strokes for different folks. Everyone has something different that works well for them. So if you found something that works effectively in your situation, feel free to share it with the crowd. I also try to create a safe and an inviting space. So if you hear anyone coming off mute, if you hear anyone who doesn't have English as a first language, do bear with them and do be respectful. But otherwise, of course, if you find that people are dancing around a topic, not being direct, be honest and be straightforward while also being respectful. So quickly, a bit about myself. My name is Chin. I am the founder of Classy and Nawal, which is a sales consulting company. A bit about my background and why you might be interested in hearing a bit from me in terms of ideation and creativity. I spent the last 5 years working out of a startup incubator accelerator known as Spring, where we focus on supporting social ventures, so businesses that are for-profit, but also at the same time using business as a force for good. Over those 5 years, I probably worked with close to 400 different entrepreneurs. Most of them were at the ideation stage, so typically supporting them with validating the idea, building their proof of concepts, and then launching into the market as well. So that's most of my background. And I'm actually running a hackathon coming up this October. And the hackathon is called the Do Good Business Challenge. So it's a hackathon focused around providing innovative solutions for retail-related businesses that are impacted by COVID. So that's a bit about my background, my experience. I've also spent a lot of time both mentoring, volunteering, judging, and even participating in various hackathons as well. So for those of you who are not familiar with a hackathon is basically a sort of competition where people come together, they pitch their ideas, they find a team, and then they try to build their product over a period of usually a weekend. The one that I'm organizing is not limited to tech. That means anyone can join. You don't have to be a tech-specific idea or solution. And it is happening over a week instead of just a weekend. This is called the Do Good Business Challenge. If you're interested, you can just search up Do Good Business Challenge and you should be able to find it. And I will provide a link at the end as well. But some key outcomes for today's workshop. First off, I want to go through some ideation exercises to help us come up with some new ideas. And then we want to touch on how to quickly vet and validate those ideas. And then I'll lastly touch on some other ideas around how to increase creativity as well. So usually at the start, these are the biggest problems that most people face, right? People really struggle with figuring out what is the right idea to pursue. In some cases, you might struggle with just coming up with ideas, or in some cases, you might have too many ideas and you just don't really know which is the best idea. So I want to bring to your attention that there are many different types of ideas because I want you to get out of the box and not just think about ideas as being something that's completely fresh and completely innovative. So obviously, different people solve problems in different ways, right? They might see one thing, they might get one inspiration, but they might think different things. So perspective is a big thing when it comes to ideation. So what I always recommend is ideation is usually best done in a team setting. So if you are by yourself, if you don't have co-founders, if you don't have teammates, try your best to find advisors that you can bounce the idea around, or even just sit down with a friend, sit down with someone who's in the industry to share with them what the problem you're trying to solve with and try to come up with different solutions together. Diversity is so important because the best analogy in HR is if you ask someone where they keep their ketchup, people who live in North America will typically keep their ketchup in the refrigerator. And people who live in Europe will typically keep their ketchup in the cupboard, in the pantry. So the default alternative when you run out of ketchup in North America is mayonnaise, because that's what's next to the ketchup in the refrigerator, right? If you live in Europe, it's more typical to go for an alternative like vinegar or salt, which is why you see, fish and chips in UK, it's usually vinegar is served as a condiment on the side. So having diversity in a group really helps you solve problems in different ways because you get different perspectives. So of course, there are those brand new ideas that you never thought could have been possible, like the selfie stick or the iTunes. Maybe they have came to be true iterations, but sometimes you get those really innovative things that just pop out of nowhere. But there are many other types of ideas as well. So instead of worrying so much about coming up with a brand new idea, you can also focus on how can I improve on something, right? Like for example, Facebook was not brand new. They were improving upon the many social networks that were existing prior to that, right? Friendster, MySpace, there are a few other ones like High Five, some of the lesser known ones. But you don't necessarily have to be completely different, right? You just have to think about how can you do something better than the competitor. The other option is how can you do it different? So if you look at Tinder, that's a great example. Matchmaking, Match.com, Plenty of Fish. There are many other options out there, but the idea is prior to Tinder, when you were going out online dating, the way you try to match up with a date is you would fill out a comprehensive profile, and they would try to match you based on your interests, based on your personality. And Tinder just made it more of the visual element. Swipe if you like it, swipe left if you don't like it. So how can you do things differently, but still solve for the same problem? That's another option. Sometimes applying innovative ideas can also just come by applying things into a different market. You can take the same exact idea and you can copy and paste it into a different market. So Foodie here is a Vancouver-based company. They also operate out of the US as well. And in their case, the story of Foodie started with consumer food delivery. So they were just basically doing the regular food delivery where like Uber Eats or like DoorDash. You would go to a restaurant, you see the menu, you want to get takeout, and then Foodie would do the delivery portion of it. And they were starting to realize that consumers were very fickle. Consumers just care about the cheapest and most affordable option. So consumers were not loyal as well. And Larissa, who was one of their sales reps at the time, was calling up a whole bunch of executive assistants, trying to test and see if there was a different market for Foodie. And she was calling corporate head offices, and she stumbled upon the concept that actually in corporate, when you think about corporate meetings, they typically order catering. And in catering, the usual suspects are you get pizza or you get sandwich and you get wraps and you get salad, that kind of stuff. So boring food. So they said, hey, why don't we try to do food delivery, but for businesses? And that actually unlocked a very interesting segment for them. And it created a win-win-win situation because now they could actually bring to businesses food that they don't normally get for their catering meetings, right? When they cater for meetings. And the win for restaurants as well is normally if you look at a restaurant, most restaurants are too busy during peak hour to deal with takeout because if it's lunchtime, you want to focus on serving your clients that are in your restaurant rather than focusing on those takeout orders. But now if you're doing catering, those business orders typically come in advance. They usually come in maybe 24 hours to 48 hours prior. So you can spend the downtime the prior day, the 3 to 4 p.m. kind of thing to prepare for some of these bulk orders. So it also created more revenue for the restaurant owners. And then on the other side, for them as a business, they also increase the average order size because if you look at consumer takeout, average order size is probably about what, $20? If you look at corporate takeout, average order size is anywhere upwards of $400 to maybe even $1,000, right? So think about, can you apply the same idea into a different market? That's another way of doing it. And sometimes, it's just really about reapplying the same existing ideas at a different time because maybe the opportunity is different, the market is different, people are more receptive, or the technology is improved. So you can see over here, electrical cars were not a new and innovative solution. Tesla has innovated around the battery technology, but the idea of an electric car is not brand new, right? So now that I've kind of gotten you to understand that when it comes to ideas, it's not just that you have to come up with something brand new. Don't attach yourself with that concept because I think so many people try too hard to do something that's entirely brand new. Let's talk about some ideas around how to come up with some of those new ideas then. So I find that the best ideas really come from the core. And a great example over here is if you think about it, if you think about Apple, why is Apple so innovative? They have the same access to the same talent, the same products, the same agencies, media, consultants. All of the things that they do are all pretty much the same as any other company out there, but yet they still continue to constantly innovate and be creative. And they do it because if you look at how they try to build a culture around the company, it really stems with the why. So this comes from Simon Sinek. If you want to look up his YouTube video, it's a TED Talk called How Great Leaders Inspire People, also commonly mislabeled as Start with the Why. But basically the concept here is if you focus on communication, many companies out there, they know what they do. They know what their products are. They know what their solutions are. Some of them know how they're different, right? Some of them know how they serve their customers, what sets them apart from their competitors. But a few of them know why exactly they do what they do. And if you start with the why, that really allows you to be creative because you're not tied down to the manifestation of the idea. You're not tied down to the what. It doesn't have to be a computer. It can be more than that. And if you look at Apple, Apple is not just the iPhone, not just the iPod, not just the MacBook Pro. It really started from the fundamental why of we want to help creatives with better expressing themselves. We want to help people with user-friendly, beautifully designed products. And how we do that is through these different products. So they're innovating by creating new products and they're not tied down to the product. So don't start with the what. Don't start by thinking, what do I want to build? Start by focusing on the why. Why am I working on this? What is my purpose, right? If you know your purpose, and usually the purpose stems from, I want to solve a big problem. So what is the problem you want to solve? Or it's usually grounded in the target customer. So maybe you might say, oh, I want to really reduce food waste. Or the other option might be, oh, I really want to help seniors. So you have two options, either focus on the seniors or focus on food waste. And in either case, then you can decide whether or not you pivot your ideas around one or the other. Welcome, Alex. I'm in the middle, so I am streaming the session live and I have recorded the session as well. So just moving on to an exercise, and Alex, you are welcome to jump in and participate in this as well. I want you to take some time to reflect on some of these points, and I will put myself on mute, maybe give you about 5 minutes. I want you to just think about what are you passionate about, what do you love to do, and what do you believe? And just to quickly reiterate this, why I'm starting with this exercise is, again, like I mentioned before, most people tend to try to ideate by focusing on what, on the solution. They tend to focus on what do I want to create? And that's not the right way to ideate, because if you tie yourself down to the what, you are very limited by the manifestation of your ideas. Instead, you want to focus more on the why. So if you know what your purpose is, if you know what you're excited about, if you know what you believe, then it's much easier to come up with different ideas. So I'll give you an example. So for example, if you say, hey, I really care about helping seniors with better connecting with each other or better forming social connections. So if that is your purpose or your passion, and you say, okay, I'm going to try and come up with ideas around solutions for that, what can I create for that? Then you are a bit more open-ended. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm going to create a social media platform for seniors. It can be many other things. It could be an event. It could be, running speed dating for seniors. It could be running different workshops. It could be a program. It could be outdoor activities. So it can take the form of many different things. And then when you go out and as you start to validate your ideas, which we will talk about in a bit, as you're trying to decide, okay, what is the best idea? Which form is the best idea? Then what you can do then is you can actually go out and test and see if you need to focus more on the customer, i.e. seniors. You might realize, oh, seniors actually don't care about getting connected, but they care about something else. Then you can decide, do I want to still focus on serving seniors if they care about this other problem more? Or the other option is maybe seniors don't have this problem, but you find that, let's say, children nowadays who are struggling with school have this problem because everything's all virtual. Then maybe you say, okay, I'm not going to create a platform for connecting seniors, but I'm going to create a platform for children to network with other children. So you can decide to pivot either around the problem or the customer. But I want you to spend 5 minutes, just reflect on what are you passionate about, what do you love to do, and what do you believe. Hi, Sarah. Welcome. I'm streaming a session live on YouTube, and I'm also recording the session. We're just in the middle of an exercise right now where I'm getting people to reflect on the following. What are you passionate about? What do you love to do? And what do you believe? Right, so I'm going to skip over the exercise. I think everyone has had enough time. So moving on, now that you've had some time to reflect on, what are some of the core beliefs that you hold, the next thing is to just reflect on what are you good at. So what are you good at? What are you not good at? What do you enjoy? What do you not enjoy? So I'm not going to actually spend some time on this exercise, but if you have the time, you can do this at a later time. Spend maybe about 5-10 minutes, just reflect what are you good at, what are you not good at. And then we will go into why this exercise is relevant in a second. But why is the why so important is because when I generally face and work with a lot of entrepreneurs, one of the common questions that they have is, how do I know if my idea is not a good idea? If it's simply not the right timing, if there isn't a market for it, if the technology is not ready for it, maybe I'm just not trying the right way, maybe I'm not raising enough capital, maybe I'm not marketing the right way, not saying the right language, know when they should give up or whether or not they should just be persistent and continue. And my answer over here is that when you think about whether or not you give up or persevere, when you are deciding to make that pivot, so I'll use the word pivot because that's the business term for it. When you decide whether you want to continue or change your direction, that's what a pivot is. When you decide if you should change, the biggest question is, how do you ground yourself? And good pivots are usually grounded in, number one, your mission, your purpose, and number two, the things that you learn. You don't just throw shit on the wall and see what sticks. It's not like you're starting a mobile app company and then you're moving to self-driving cars and then you're doing AR, VR, right? You're not trying random stuff. So in this sense then, if you're not just trying random stuff, if your true north, if your mission is still the same, your destination has not changed. You're just trying to find a different way to get there. You're taking a detour, so to speak, right? So if you look at this picture, it's not like you turn around and walk away from that wall. You're just finding a different way around the rock, right? Maybe there's a big hard rock that you can't dig through. You're just finding a different way around it. So that's the idea here when you're deciding, like, should I give up on my business or should I continue? I would say if you are truly passionate about what you're doing, continue doing it, but don't be too tied down to the manifestation of your idea. Maybe it's not best done as an app. Maybe it's best done as an event, or maybe it's a program, or maybe it's a consulting service. But you're not just trying random stuff, right? You're not going from an app that helps seniors connect to doing, a VR-related video game company that's entirely related. If you pivot to an event, maybe it's going to be an event for seniors to help them meet other seniors. So it's the same thing. You're still doing something that's related. It still serves the same purpose. It's just manifested in a different way. Make sense? So back to the topic of ideation. If you are still struggling with coming up with ideas, And the most obvious way is to try to think about what problems you have. Think about problems that you have at work, at school, at home, problems that you face. You could also think about problems that other people have. So this here is Nicola, sorry, uh, and his story is he was a doctor in Uganda, and he was noticing that a lot of the hospitals, what they were doing is they were struggling to find the right drugs. And expecting mothers, when they gave birth, they would bleed out on the operating table because they couldn't get the right drug to help them help their blood clot. But these drugs, a lot of the hospitals would have it in neighboring hospitals, but they don't know which hospitals have the right inventory. And usually they have to drive from hospital to hospital to just see who has the drug. So he's trying to use blockchain to connect all of it together, right? So he's seeing it in somebody else's problem. He, as a doctor, does not face it, but he's seeing that the hospitals that he worked with, they have this problem. So you can solve someone else's problem. You can start future planning as well. What are some problems that will happen in the near future, right? And the big and common ones are centered around energy, food, clean water. So these are problems that might not be pressing right now, but will be in the near future be very important problems that need to be solved as well. So if you can come up with ideas that solve for those upcoming problems, that's another way to start. You can think about how you can save money as well. So there's this great Vancouver-based company called Arbutus Medical. What they do is when Lawrence actually started the company, they were in the hospital. I think it was also somewhere in Africa. And that was actually how doctors were doing operations. They couldn't get access to clean, sanitize, sterilized drills, which are very expensive equipment. So normally those sterilized hospital drills are usually upwards of $3,000 or more dollars. And these kind of hardware drills, they're a lot cheaper, but they're not the cleanest. And doctors would actually use these drills to do bone operations because it was simply too expensive for them to get those fancy sterilized drills. So they decided, hey, how can we help them afford more sterilized, clean drills that can do the same thing? So they've invented a drill cover that goes on the drill, and it's a sanitized cover. So instead of having to buy a drill that is sanitized, you just get this special cover. It covers the drill, and then you can clean the drill and sanitize it, and then you can put it back on the drill again. So how can you help people save money? You can also think about how can I make life easier, right? So look at the problems that you face or the problems that your customers face, and how can you streamline things? How can you make things easier? So MailChimp is a great example. People have to do emailing. They have to send out their newsletters to a lot of people and say, hey, we help you with kind of organizing your subscriber base, segmenting them. We can help you with crafting your campaigns. So that's what MailChimp does. So again, an exercise, take some time to reflect. What are some of your frustrations, personal frustrations at school, at work? I'm not going to actually go through this, but when you have this time, just reflect. What are you frustrated by? And I think this really helps because a lot of people think, when you think about ideation, they think to come from a aspirational perspective, and they focus more on what do I want rather than what I'm annoyed by. So focus instead on what are you annoyed by, because there are frustrations, and these things are usually things that are more apparent to you than things that you're focusing on getting. So what are the problems rather than what are the opportunities? As you try to ideate and as you think about problems, one strong encouragement is to use the 5 whys framework. And what it is basically, it comes from lean manufacturing, and it allows you to drill down to the root cause of the problem. A lot of people, when they ideate and when they think about problem solving, they tend to stop too early and they solve a symptom of the problem rather than actually solving the root cause of the problem. So for example, over here, you can see, why did the machine break down? There was an overload that blew the fuse. If you stop there and you fix the fuse, yes, the machine will start working again, but the problem would probably not go away and the machine would still break down. So you need to know what caused the overload, what made the fuse blow out. Why? Because the bearing was not sufficiently lubricated. Why? Because the lubrication pump was faulty. Why? Because the shaft was worn and rattling. Why? Because no strainer was attached and a metal scrap got in. So sometimes it's 5 whys, sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. The idea is you want to really challenge yourself, both yourself And as you go out and do customer discovery and interview your customers, also really understand and ask why enough times to really dig down and get down to the root cause. Because when you do that, that's when you actually get those ideas that are those special aha moments where people go like, why didn't I think of that? Right? So Uber is a great example. If Travis, the founder of Uber, said, hey, I can't get a ride, I can't get a taxi because there are no taxis around, had he stopped there, he would just become a taxi driver. But it's because he's asking himself why. Why are there no taxis around? There are not enough, right? Because there's a problem with the taxi cartel system. It's expensive to get a taxi driver license. So he said, okay, I'm going to create a system where anybody can become a taxi driver. So he's changing the system. He's solving for the system. So Grab is the Asian equivalent of Uber. But the idea is basically the same, right? How can you solve the root cause of the problem rather than focus on the symptom? Another example, Foodie, which we talked about earlier, they identified the target customer was originally consumers. They found that the market was too saturated. They said, hey, who else has this problem? It's businesses also have the problem of food delivery. And they said, okay, no one else is serving businesses. So that's how they actually pivoted and found the best way to actually really unlock growth for your company. So when it comes to narrowing your idea down, this is how I would recommend that you do it. Focus less on opportunities, focus more on values. And the reason why this is important is because many of us, myself included, I was brought up to learn how to evaluate and make decisions based on pros and cons. So in school, they would teach me, okay, if I have to decide between picking job A or job B, or between picking this idea or that idea, you want to write down a list of pros and cons for both of them. And the reason why that's a faulty way of doing decision making is because it tends to focus on rationale, and rationale is not always the best way of making decisions. And the reason why is because every person's pros and cons are different. So my pros and cons are different from your pros and cons. And how your pros and cons are weighted are also different. I might care more about certain things than you do. And the reason why it's so different is because we all have different core values. So for example, I'm a family man, I have a kid. I'm probably going to value security more than you would value freedom. If you care about being free, then there's nothing wrong with that. It's just we have different values, so we would weigh certain pros and cons differently. So the same applies to evaluating ideas as well. So the most important thing to start is by understanding yourself and understanding what your core values are. So the example over here is more on a job search situation. So for example, job A, do you want to work for a startup? High potential for reward, exciting opportunity. Yes, it's going to be risky. Maybe no work-life balance because when you work for a startup, you work all day, every day. But you'll possibly also have a huge amount of ability to grow with the company, right? And job B, corporate, secure income, 9-to-5 work style, stable role. So every time I ask this question, usually it's 50-50. Some people will prefer job A, some people will prefer job B. But let's say if you know this person and this person's name, John, his core values are family, health, security, and growth. You can probably see that John will likely prefer job B. Because if he cares about family, health, security, and growth, job B, corporate lifestyle, secure income will speak to the family value, right? Security, growth. Having that 9-to-5 work style will allow him to spend more time on himself, on fitness, so he can spend time going to the gym, cooking. So again, it speaks to health. Maybe it's not going to be as rewarding because he can't grow as much, because you can grow more in the startup. But it's going to speak to more of his core values. So John will probably prefer job B. So if you're still in the discovery phase and you really don't know, like, what are my core values? This is how you would try to discover it. There are many other exercises. This is just one of the ones that I find works best for me. And you can try it out and see if it works for you as well. So what you want to do in this exercise is you want to spend some time and try to list down 10 values that appeal to you. So start with 10, and as you write down these values, try to use single words. These are key things that you care about, things like power, adventure, security, freedom, kindness, authenticity. So what are the core values that you care about? What are 10 things? Once you have the 10 things, the next thing to try to do is to try to rank them from 1 to 10. And if you struggle with ranking them, all you have to do is just compare values that are on your list. So compare two values. So for example, if you have adventure and freedom on your list, which one is more important? So maybe, okay, freedom is more important than adventure. And then you just start comparing other two values then. So, okay, freedom and creativity, which is more important? If it's freedom still, then you have adventure, freedom, creativity, right? So start to organize it from a list of 1 to 10. And what you want to do is once you have your list of 1 to 10, you want to look at your top 3 values. Don't look at more than 3. And the reason why I recommend doing it this way is because if I ask you at the start of this exercise to tell me what is your number 1 core value or what are the top 3 things that you care about, it's very hard for most people to distill themselves and say, these are the top 3 things that encompass my entire life. A lot of people want to embody a lot more things, and that's all fine. But the reason why 3 things is important is because most people will at any time only have the attention to really focus on your top 3 values. So when you have your top 3 values, what you want to do is those are the values that will influence most of your decision. So my personal top 3 values are growth, contribution, and authenticity. So in that case, then growth, everything I do, I like to learn new things. Contribution is I like to teach, I like to work with other people, I like to coach. And then authenticity, I don't like to bullshit, I don't like to beat around the bush, I like to be honest and transparent. So I noticed that these values were influencing a lot of my decisions once I defined them, because prior to that, before I was working on my own company, I was working at Spring, and I noticed that I really loved the job that I was doing while I was working in the incubator accelerator because it spoke to my top 2 values. It was speaking to growth. I was learning all the time from mentors. I was learning from investors, learning from other entrepreneurs. And then I was also in a position where I could contribute. So I can work with the companies, help them with sales, help them with growing their teams, help them with designing your products. So I was constantly speaking to my top 2 values. So if you are able to find an opportunity where you can live up your values, then you don't necessarily have to start a brand new company. You might actually find that maybe you can actually join someone else's company. Someone shares the same values, has the same mission, then do that. If you don't have to start something on your own, then don't do it. It's much better to work in a team and contribute to someone else who is also doing the same thing. If you are wondering, like, should I start something? I would say you only want to really start something brand new if you can't find someone else who's already doing what you plan on doing, or if you don't share the same values. Like if you find another company and they have the same mission that you have, but the way they want to manifest it is completely different. They don't care about authenticity, or they don't care about security, or they don't care about some of the things that you care about, right? So yeah, just reflect on what is important to you, what do you believe, and as you plan on, if you do go down the path of building a company, you want to think about other things like what values do you look for in employees as well, or what values do you want customers to see in you. Same process goes for company values. Most companies will have like a long list of like 10 or more values. At any given time, a company can only spend and focus their attention on the top 3 values. So values can evolve over time, but I would say they tend to be relatively static. It's usually, I'd say about every 5 years or so, you might change some values. When I started, it was growth, contribution, and passion. It's evolved into growth, contribution, and authenticity now. So now, the reason why I've gone through the process of focusing so much on values, so much on purpose, is because when you evaluate your ideas, if you're at that crossroad where you're deciding like, which idea should I go after, which idea am I interested in, you want to start looking at both your skills and your values. So in the example over here is you can say, you might have this set of skills. These are things that you're good at. You're good at photography, you're tech savvy, you're good at product sales, marketing. Some of these skills could be skills that are professional skills. Some of them could be personal skills as well. So maybe you're good at public speaking or you're good at teaching. Those are related to whatever idea you want to do, but they can also be very personal things and not necessarily something you do in a professional setting. And then let's say you have 2 options here. You can say, okay, one idea is, or one problem I want to solve is there are not enough vegan options for pizza. Or the other option is cell phone contracts are too complicated. If you can see over here on the left, if you have more experience around wireless industry knowledge, if you are passionate about tech, it's probably better for you to go after idea number 2, which is to deal with self-owned contracts, rather than focus on the vegan options, right? Unless, of course, there are other things that are not considered, that are not in this picture. Then the other thing to do is cross-reference your values to the problems. So here you can see if you care about health, wealth, growth, love, and freedom. And then if you have 2 problems, number 1 is no secure and trusted way to borrow money. Number 2 is it's difficult for busy office workers to eat healthily. You might be more excited by problem number 2 because you care more about health, you care more about love, growth, and freedom. So just evaluate your values and think about the problems and see what problem speaks more to your values. So I hope that helps you understand where your skill set comes in and where your values comes in as you're evaluating your ideas to figure out which idea do you pursue. And it's much more important to focus on these rather than just the opportunities, because what you will realize as you go out and test your ideas, as you launch your business, is that opportunities will come and go, right? Oftentimes, most businesses, they don't fail because there's not enough opportunity. They can't get customers. There's not enough investors. All these opportunities will come and go. But at the end of the day, the businesses fail not because they fail, because the founders give up. Businesses fail when you give up, right? So at the end of the day, if you are passionate about the idea, if you are grounded by your values, if it really appeals to your skill set, then you are much more likely to succeed rather than just focusing on, I want to be my own boss, I want to make a lot of money. Because you might realize that it's not that easy to make money. Maybe the first 2 years you can't make any money at all. You might think that, I'm going to have a free and flexible schedule, but then you quickly realize that you're accountable to your employees, to your customers, to your investors. So technically, you still have a boss as well. So don't focus too much on opportunities, focus more on values and what you get at. The other big question I typically get from a lot of entrepreneurs is they struggle with deciding how to differentiate from competitors. So if you remember from the start of the presentation, you don't have to have an idea that is completely innovative, completely brand new that no one else has to think about. Competition is actually a good thing. Competition is validation. It means that someone else sees the problem and sees an opportunity there as well. As a matter of fact, if there are no competitors in your market, I would say that's actually a warning sign. It probably means that this idea has no potential, either because maybe the tech is not ready for it, or maybe there's simply no demand for it, right? For example, you might say, hey, I want to create a solution to help children with distance learning. And maybe your solution is unique in XYZ sort of method. But you try and launch it and you find that no one really cares about the solution because there is no interest for it. So it doesn't have to be different. Just because it doesn't exist doesn't mean it should exist. It doesn't exist. It might not exist because the market is simply not interested in it at all, right? So don't just try to innovate for the sake of innovating. When you are trying to innovate, when you're trying to come up with a new idea, you need to try to find some way to actually reduce costs or increase value. So one good strategy as you think about how to differentiate from your competitors is to apply the blue ocean technique. And what the blue ocean technique does is you're trying to create uncontested market space. You're trying to capture new demand rather than compete with your competitors and go after the same customers. You want to try to find new customers. So how do you do this? You apply this 4 things. What can you eliminate, reduce, raise, and create? So the example over here and how you would do this exercise is you would look at your space, look at what your competitors are doing, and you want to, under these 4 categories, try to chart out all of the different things that they're doing. So you can see over here, Cirque du Soleil, this is one example. When Cirque du Soleil launched, they said, there are many other circuses out there. And what all the other circuses are doing is they all compete on the same thing. They all try to have the cheapest tickets. They all have the most expensive or most amazing star performers. They have elaborate animal shows. They compete on having the element of danger and excitement. They focus on having they don't care as much about the venue. They tend to move from place to place. And they said, okay, we're going to do it differently. So what they did over here is they actually reduce an emphasis on star performers, reduce an emphasis on animal shows. So actually completely eliminated that. So basically anyone, any acrobat could be, you don't have to be a star performer. There's no animal shows and circle shows. They reduce the emphasis on thrills and danger. They are raising an emphasis on the venue. Their venues are usually fixed venues. And then they create a team. So they create some new elements that none of the other circuses are doing. So they focus more on arts and music, on the team, on storytelling, and this allowed them to raise the prices. And what it allowed them to do is they were able to capture a new market. Because all the other old circuses, by competing on the same things, they were going after families. But what Cirque du Soleil was doing is because they focus a bit more on some of these new elements and less of an emphasis on some of the older elements, they were able to go after people who are more interested in artistic entertainment, people who would attend Broadway shows. So these are people who would be willing to pay a larger ticket. They want to go on a fancy date. They want to see some more artistic, some theater, some music. And that's how they actually get the same experience in a circus setting. Another great example here, the wine industry is also very competitive. Or you can also look at the automaker industry, cars, same thing. If you look at car dealerships, they all compete on the same thing. They always talk about zero interest lending. They talk about the best engines. They always all focus on the same things. So here, the example over here is from Yellowtail Wine. It's an Australian wine company. So there were two main categories that they saw in the market. There are premium wines and there are budget wines. And you can see premium wines, they all focus on they're expensive. They all use fancy terminology to describe. They all focus on like how well their wines are aged, the vineyard, how prestigious it is, how complex their flavors are. And then if you look at budget wines, they focus on just being as cheap as possible. They focus on some of the other things are all about the same. And they said, okay, we are going to focus on a different type of brand and we want to try to capture a different market. And what they did is we create some new elements. We said, we want to focus on wine that is easy to drink because through their customer discovery, from speaking to customers, they were finding and interviewing people, they found that a lot of people don't drink wine, not because they don't want to, because they feel that they don't understand wine. So they say, hey, I'm not going to drink wine because I can't understand the complexities of it, and I don't want to come across as someone who is out of my zone. So I prefer to drink cocktails, or I prefer to drink beer. Right? So they said, okay, we are going to create wine that's easy to drink, easy to select, fun and adventurous. Those are the elements that they focus on. And then they eliminate the focus on complex descriptions, aging quality. They reduce an emphasis on the emphasis on the vineyard, the emphasis on the complexity of the flavors, and then allow them to go after people who were interested in drinking wine but don't drink wine right now. So all those people who drink mixers, people who drink beer, so that allowed them to open up to a new market instead of competing and going after wine drinkers that all the other winemakers are competing for. If that doesn't help, my encouragement is don't worry too hard about being different on day one. You can launch your business, you can start an idea, and you can be exactly the same as all your competitors on day one. There is nothing wrong with that. Hootsuite, Vancouver-based social media company, when they first launched, they were one out of 15 other companies that did exactly the same thing. You could basically go on your app, you could link maybe 5 or 6 Twitter accounts, and you could post in one place and it would post to all of your accounts for you, right? They did exactly the same thing as about 15 other competitors in the market. And what allowed them to eventually become different is they had a plan. They knew how they wanted to be different. They knew that they wanted to be able to integrate more social media channels, be able to post to Facebook, LinkedIn, post to Instagram. They want to do analytics. They want to help you scheduling your posts ahead of time. So they started planning for differentiation early in the road. And how do you start to plan for that? These are some things that might give you some ideas. So number one is don't worry too much about being different. Focus more on executing first and building a brand. Because I will say that if you are doing something interesting, people will copy your idea. And that's a good thing, right? Imitation is the best form of flattery. So don't worry about people copying your idea. Instead, focus on building your brand, because at the end of the day, if you have a strong brand, people will trust your brand. And it doesn't matter if your competitor is doing the same thing. If people trust you, more people will go after you rather than going for your competitor. The other option is to create a community. So how can you engage your customers? How can you connect them with each other in their own community or within your community? And community is so strong because once you create a community, it's very hard for competitors to steal your customers away because they've already established a relationship with other individuals in the community. So for example, GoPro has done a pretty good job building up their community. They have a community of adventure enthusiasts who like to share images and photos with each other, right? So if a competitor comes in, they might be able to create a device that's similar, but it's very hard to steal people away from the community because they're really active and engaged with each other. And then the third idea is how can you integrate? The more things you can connect with the person, with your customer, and their specific area of interest, the harder it is for them to move away to a competitor. So for example, if you have a solution and you say that your solution is, let's say, HR recruiting software, and you start to integrate it with payroll, and you start to integrate it with performance management, the more you integrate your solution with all of these other things that are also related to HR, then the harder it is for your customers to switch to a competitor that doesn't do all of that. Because then if the competitor also does HR related solutions, but they don't do payroll, then they need to find someone else to do payroll, right? So how can you integrate your solution with many other things that your customer will need in order to prevent them from moving to a competitor? But at the end of the day, these are just all ideas around differentiation from competitors. Focus more on what excites you, right? What do you care about? What are you really passionate about? So what we have essentially gone through is we've gone through this entire diagram. So where we started is we started over here, focusing on understanding what you love. What is your purpose? What's your mission? What are you passionate about? And then we did an exercise on what are you good at, your skill set. So hopefully that should help you match up and get closer to the passion area. And then as we discuss how do you validate your idea, using the 5 whys, how do you go out and test demand? That's where we're talking about what the world needs. And then hopefully if the world needs this, you can also get paid for it. So ideally you would end up in that situation where you have that perfect mix of everything, right? So if you are in that beautiful situation where you are able to do something you enjoy, you're good at, the world needs, and you can be paid for, then I think you've found your dream job or either your dream business to run. So that's it for the ideation portion of this workshop. I just want to share some of my tips and insights around creativity just to get you thinking about how you can try to be more creative or put yourself in new situations. So when it comes to creativity, there are many types of creativity. Not all creatives are the ones that we tend to associate with. And the ones we tend to associate with are what we call the spontaneous and emotional. The artists, the musicians, those are people who basically come up with something brand new, right? Some creativity comes from a lot of logical process as well. So you can see over here, the main types are number 1, cognitive and deliberate. So those are like the Thomas Edison light bulb moments. Those type of creativity requires actually a lot of knowledge. You need to really understand the topic, and you need to spend a lot of time on it. The other option is emotional and conscious. So those are like epiphanies, your aha moments, right? You actually require some of those quiet time. So you actually need to, instead of focusing on the problem, remove yourself from the problem and actually allow yourself to take a rest. That's why you get a lot of great ideas where you're taking the shower or when you're taking a shit, right? So those are when you're actually disconnecting, where you're not actively working on the problem, but you also already have all that knowledge that's in your head and you allow it to kind of naturally come up. And then spontaneous, sorry, I think I confused it. So the spontaneous is the one that I just talked about. So stop working on the problem. The emotional piece is where you're constantly thinking about it, but you're not focusing so much on the actual logic behind it. So it's more like meditative, where you just keep thinking about the problem, but you're not trying to match patterns. And then the last one is spontaneous and emotional, where you focus just on doing new things, I would say. That's the best way to actually spark some of that creativity. So if you look at certain things, a lot of people look in their life and most people in life love to be spontaneous, but also love structure. And those are two very conflicting things. So what I encourage you to do is I want you to structure in time to be spontaneous. So you can actually structure a block of, let's say, half an hour a day to actually do something brand new that you've never done before. And you can do things like, go out and try to see the sunset, or try to catch the sunrise, or go out for a walk to a place that you've never been to before, or take a new route to work. All those things will actually encourage and allow you to become more spontaneous, and it will help improve creativity as well. So at the end of the day, you can start to become more creative and develop more new ideas when you are willing to experiment, willing to fail, willing to make mistakes, when you are connecting yourself in a greater network, and you are surrounding yourself with, like I mentioned before, diverse people with different experiences and have different perspectives. And sometimes you just need to give yourself some time, because ideas will actually take some time to evolve over time. So don't try to rush it, and don't be opposed to revisiting old ideas. You don't always have to come up with something brand new. You can work on just thinking about how can I improve on things that have come before, right? So one encouragement over here is problems can't be solved with the same mind that created them. So the best encouragement is to get out of your mindset. Don't try to think about the problem itself. Try to come from a different perspective, and that will allow you to be a bit more creative. And so that's basically it for the ideation and creativity portion. The last question that a lot of people usually get at this stage is, should I share my idea? What if people steal my idea? Do I need to patent? Do I need to trademark? The tips over here is, I would say, don't worry too much about people stealing your idea at this point. Ideas are a dime a dozen. Execution is key. You've probably heard that advice a lot. And the reason why that's so important is because, number one, when you're sharing your idea with people, think about who you're sharing your idea with. If you're sharing your idea with an investor, or if you're sharing an idea with an advisor, they don't care about your idea at all. An investor is in the job of investing. They care about making a return. They don't want to create the idea themselves, right? They're not usually the entrepreneur. So they will hear your same pitch probably, at least 10 to 20 times a month if they're really active as an investor. So never get an investor to sign an NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement. So if you're sharing with people, if you might be sharing with someone who could steal your idea, let's say you're speaking to a potential co-founder or maybe a team member, what you want to do then is, when you start to share your idea, focus more on the what, less on the how. So you'll be open to sharing what the idea is, but you don't need to get into the specifics of how it will work, like the special algorithms that you might have, or how you would match people, or what makes it different and unique. You don't need to get into that much detail. You should still be able to share what your idea is without actually giving away the entire secret, right? So the more you share, the more it allows you to actually improve on your idea, because when you share, you can get feedback, you can start to build your network, and network is so important. When you start to build network, it really becomes a real thing, and people will push you. You will push yourself more as well, because you feel that now people know you're working on something. You have to be accountable to it. You have to actually show them that you're not a failure. And as you build your network, you actually can find advisors, mentors, investors. And yeah, it starts to help you build up that expertise in that field as well. So start to become a thought leader in space. And yeah, if you do need to get into the details on like how you're getting things done, then you can get someone to sign an NDA. So you can get an investor to sign an NDA if they are already saying, okay, I want to invest in your company. Can you show me how you're actually building it? So if you need to get to the how, then it's okay to get someone to sign an NDA. So at this stage, all you have to really start to worry and focus on is, which idea is the best idea? Are you actually solving a problem or a symptom? Are you actually excited about it? And go and make it a reality. So that's basically it for this workshop. So for those of you who are around and still watching, there is a hackathon coming up on October 3rd. So if you are interested in testing out some of your ideas, or if you're looking for team members, this might be an interesting opportunity for you. It is a retail-focused hackathon. So for those of you who are not familiar with a hackathon is basically a startup competition where you pitch your ideas, you form a team, and then you work on building the solution over the period of the competition. Most hackathons are usually only a weekend, but mine is actually a week long. So that's a bit more time. I will also be matching you up with businesses as well. So if you say, hey, I want to work on a retail grocery related idea, then we have businesses that are participating that are grocery stores. If you're saying, hey, I want to work on an idea that is for office spaces, then we have like WeWork and a few other co-working spaces that are participating as well. So if you have ideas, they don't have to be tech solutions. They can also be service. They can also be product ideas. Then you're encouraged to check out this hackathon and see if you can actually take some of your ideas to life. And if you're interested in other workshops, we do have a series coming up. Next week, we are talking about how to pitch. And then the week after that, we're talking about finding your co-founders. And there are a few other sales related topics as well. So there's one on sales techniques on September 24th, and there's one on sales and marketing strategy during Vancouver Startup Week on Monday, September 28th. So all of the details on classynovel.eventbrite.com. And that's basically it. Any questions? Here's my email, and here's my LinkedIn to connect. Hey, Sarah and Vanessa. Sorry, I saw that you both joined in at the last minute, but any questions? I know you missed some of the portion. It is being recorded and it was streamed live as well.
Yeah, sorry, I got some personal issue and I come late a little bit. Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries.
Yeah, but it's great. It's can you send the recording?
Yeah, sure thing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, just send me an email and I can send you the recording.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions, any comments? If not, otherwise that is it and we can end the session.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jean.
Great, no problem. Good to see you.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, anything from you, Vanessa? All right, if not, I think I'm going to end the session. All right, have a good evening.
You too. Thank you.